Nervous about the volatility of public markets? Looking to invest in Canadian real estate but not finding the right opportunities? Neighborhood Holdings may be an option. Nearly 10 years of consistent performance, Neighborhood aims to provide stable income while preserving invested capital, target net yield above 8%. At the heart of the strategy is Neighborhood's mortgage product portfolio of first position 100% residential mortgages across Canada with an average loan to value under 55%. Neighborhood partners with mortgage brokers and financial institutions to support quality borrowers in transition who may not currently qualify for traditional financing and have a temporary need for capital. Neighborhood's portfolio has no exposure to commercial, construction, or bare land properties, is geographically diversified across major urban and suburban centers in Canada. Check out the links in the description or visit neighborhoodholdings.com to view the offering memorandum for investors and advisors or to explore mortgage broker partnership opportunities. This is not advice. Please consult a professional advisor before investing a loonie in any of these investments. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this information discussed today is not intended to be or construed as investment advice. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets.
The dirty secret is that no one's ever going to get paid back.
People have the shortest memories when it comes to investment.
We just got to get Keith into Bitcoin.
Hey, there's a bubble. Welcome back to Loonie Hour, episode 193. As always, joined by the three amigos. We've got the Boomer and Richard Diaz here alongside. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen. Rich.
Hello.
Back in Montreal, back to the art wall.
I'm back to the art wall. Back home, it's really hot and horrible. It's very hot and humid here. On the plus side, ladies are wearing summer skirts, and I went out and spent the evening. Spent the evening drinking with a friend of mine who I went to McGill with. I did honors econ at McGill, and I got like C pluses, okay, because it was impossibly hard. And this guy actually got A's and went on to do his PhD in economics, and he's a lovely chap. Sometimes he listens to the podcast. Sometimes
is he going to replace you on the pod then?
No, I'm far more charming, but okay. He's smarter. So
isn't it funny because no one today at university would ever get a C on anything? You know, it's all
that's true.
That is true.
A minus, yeah, straight
it's called
over.
Grade inflation. It's also transitory, apparently. So
okay. I had a great time last week on the road in Ontario. Yeah, remember that trip that we did?
I remember.
That was I'm missing you guys already. For anyone that hasn't watched the actual. I mean, there's a lot of people that listen to this through audio, Spotify, Apple. If you haven't gone and watched last week's episode on YouTube, highly encourage you to go check it out. The visuals, the video quality from a friend of the show, Adam DC, who put that together, I think is really top notch. I'm super excited and stoked how that one turned out. I thought it was a great conversation with Ben. And I think it's also worth another shout out to the sponsors that made that happen, which was Neighborhood Holdings and Beachy. Couldn't be done without those guys. And
Beachy Cycling is a cycling shop.
Beachy Cycling,
yeah,
big on the West Coast here. Lots of cycling.
And we also had a social event at the Toronto Cricket Club last week, Monday night. And thank you for everyone attended. That was so much fun. Great conversations. It was good to do that as well. One of the highlights of the week for me was fishing, off the wharf.
Oh, yeah.
On the pontoon boat. So we learned there's a lot of fish that you can catch out there in the sea or lake. Some of them had a good fight. What was it? The one that you were trying to net, Rich? It was a pike.
Oh, the pike, which I freaked out.
That was fun. And then we had the bass. They had some fight to them. But we've learned that the one fish that's very passive and docile, it doesn't move at all, is the starfish. So if you ever catch a starfish, you're not going to be in for an exciting time. That's what we learned as well.
No, they're very boring.
Yeah.
But they do have their qualities.
Well, yeah. Anyways, it was a good trip, and we again highly encourage everybody to go check out the YouTube version of that episode. Without further ado, Rich, we've got a busy episode. We've got lots going on in the world. Obviously, geopolitics is heating up. Got some Canadian real estate data on a national level. We got some population data, which we talked about with Ben in last week's episode. So that's coming home to roost. Some fiascos with the elbows up crowd and the Fed, the Swiss bank, the BOJ. So there's lots going on in the world. So we'll try to touch on all of it. But yeah, Rich, first of all, we had the Canadian real estate data for the month of May. Month of May, number of home sales recorded on the MLS climbed 3.6% month over month. CREA, Canadian Real Estate Association, calling a bottom.
Whoa.
May 2025. May 2025 not only saw home sales move higher at the national level for the first time in more than 6 months, but prices at the national level also stopped falling. It's only 1 month of data. One car does not make a parade, but there is a sense that maybe the expected turnaround in housing activity this year was just delayed for a few months by the initial tariff chaos and uncertainty. So there you have it. CREA calling the bottom.
So the tariffs triggered the slow growth or no growth? Is that what they're implying?
I mean, to be honest, the market was actually moving like decently well prior to the tariff stuff. So I can see where they're coming from. But I mean, I think it's much too soon to start calling bottoms, particularly the disaster that's happening in the GTA and the condo market, pre-construction, housing starts collapsing. Yeah, I think all the audience knows our views on this. I think that it's, as the tariff stuff cleans itself up here, logically, you'd think you get a few more buyers back to the table after you're running near 10, 20-year lows in home sales. But there's still a lot of inventory to work through. But it's interesting, right? On a national level, you've got inventory right now. You have 4.9 months of inventory on a national basis. That's actually right near the long-term average of 5 months. So, and that's really predominantly because if you look at markets like Alberta, for example, that's continues to be the clear leader. If you look at Edmonton, even though they just choked in the Cup Finals again.
Ouch, that's a little harsh.
Home prices
Come
are
on,
up
guys. That's, my God. What are there? How many teams in the league? 32, 34?
32.
Yeah, so they get to the final two, the game 6.
There's no participation medals.
Yeah, you ain't first, you're last.
That's right.
But what's crazy? Fun stat is before we get into Edmonton real estate. Corey Perry, Rich.
Oh, I know.
Guy's lost. Keith, he's been to the Cup Finals 5 of the last 6 years, and he's lost every single time.
No, I thought it was 5 in a row, Steve.
It's not in a row. He skipped one year. I don't remember what year it was, but he's been bouncing around. He was in Cup Finals, I think, with Montreal, Dallas, Tampa Bay, and then twice with the Oilers.
Yeah.
He's lost 5 in the last 6.
Oh.
Guy is cursed. Anyways. But the good thing
Tell us about Edmonton.
The good thing is Edmonton home prices are up. They're up 10%. Actually, 10.1%.
Wow,
so
really? That much? Year on year?
There you go.
That's amazing.
Month over month, year on year.
Year on year. So you can cry your sorrows into your home equity there. 10.1%.
But back with the Cree.
Rich, hold on. Rich, Montreal, 8.6% year over year.
Amazing.
That's number 2 in the country. Then GTA is down 4.5%, which is really dragging the entire national benchmark down.
And what is Saskatchewan? What are their numbers?
Oh, come on, man. I don't have that in front of me.
We thought you were Canada's real estate expert.
It's like a rectangle.
Regina, Saskatchewan. All right, drum roll. Boy, 8.6. Tied with Montreal.
So big picture, houses are never going to be affordable ever again for anybody.
Well, I mean, they're still very affordable in Edmonton and Saskatchewan.
Okay, fine.
Yes, they've had a nice little jump after really kind of being like laggards for the last 10 plus years. I mean, GTA and Vancouver are basically pulling the national home price index. I've said that before. I mean, I think it counts for close to 70% of the index.
I love Steve's backhanded compliment for Edmonton and Saskatchewan. Well, yeah, but
we just lost a lot of Edmontonians.
Yeah,
I didn't. I'm pro Edmonton. Come on,
I was cheering for Edmonton. I'm McDavid deserves a cup.
Whatever. Go Habs, go. My question is: so we've got interest rates. We've got that which have come down. We have sentiment now that we're friends with the U.S. again. I cite Mark Carney's glowing introduction of Donald Trump at the G7 summit just a couple of days ago. Is that enough to sort of overcome the rising unemployment rate? I guess, is that what we're seeing?
I mean, yeah, I guess it comes down to how high you think job losses are going to go. I mean, I think all three of us would probably agree they're going higher. It's just a matter of like how much higher are they going to go is
okay.
A good debate to have. But I think from what I see, I mean, I think housing, particularly residential housing, is so driven by human emotion, whether it's sellers sticking to their peak pricing from a couple years ago because everybody thinks their house is the best, and you live there for 20 years and you have all these memories there, and so like it's emotional from that perspective. It's emotional for the buyers, or they just read headlines and they get scared about tariffs and Trump and 51st state, and so they just move to the sidelines. So I think my belief is, as that settles, which I think we're in the process of seeing that evolve today, that you're going to see a bounce back in housing activity. Again, I'm not saying you're going back to this bull market. I'm just saying it's probably not sustainable to continue to run at 30-year lows in places like the GTA and Vancouver.
Okay.
Like, you're going to have a bounce, and you're going to bounce off the lows, and that should help at least some of the stale activity get absorbed. Or
isn't there also like the chart that I posted this week? I got out of my lane, everybody. Started posting about housing, which is always very dangerous for me. But isn't it also just with respect to like not only where you are, clearly Edmonton versus Toronto and Vancouver, etc., but also what type of house? So like a condo versus a single family home.
Yeah, as you think about think about what happened with rates and everything, and what happened during the pandemic was everybody was like adding to their real estate portfolio, but like, I'm going to be a super landlord and own 10 condos.
Oh, like the housing minister.
Yeah. The new housing minister.
Tell us about that one. Why don't we, is it interesting? I thought it was.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
I don't really care personally.
No,
The former mayor of Vancouver was getting grilled on the housing file, who's now the housing minister. And they're like, well, I don't know whether even they were asking, but it turns out through disclosures, he has like an $11 million portfolio of real estate properties in Vancouver.
Well, he didn't quite disclose it the way he was supposed to disclose it, which is like, part of the Liberal campaign promise. But I mean, I thought it was more of just a cheap shot. I was just having fun. But anyway,
well, I mean, it comes full circle that he says house prices don't need to and probably shouldn't fall, because
and that's the irony. I don't think housing prices should go lower. And
we just need to build more social housing.
Yeah, more modular housing. That's going to solve.
Steve, to help me catch up a little bit, the housing data numbers that you were sharing earlier, it was year over year, but is that prices or units sold?
That was pricing. Yeah.
So pricing is up 6-8%. What about month over month? Or have we decided that doesn't matter because of
now you're confusing me. Monthly activity came in 4.3%. National home sales are up 3.6% month over month. Again, month over month,
So that's units then, right?
Yeah, that's units sold. Okay. But like measuring a housing market on a month over month basis is kind of stupid. I mean, 1 month of data doesn't really tell you a whole lot. But in general, seasonal. Yeah, I think in general, you're starting to see activity is perking up a little bit. But again, perking up off of like very, very low levels that I don't think is anything to get too excited about.
And so the summer is normally a lull because people are on holiday and stuff, and then September, October.
Yeah, exactly. There's a seasonality to housing, right? So I mean,
wait. Which is the most? I don't know this. Sorry. The most, obviously, the winter is the. Can you just do the seasons?
Yeah. So
how many months a year do you work? That's the question, basically. We're trying to.
No, I want to know. I'm serious. I want to know.
March, April, May will typically be your 3 busiest months. Springtime. I don't know why. Just human behavior. Lots of listings come on. If you want to buy and sell in the same period, it's more liquid. March, April, May is the highest level of sales activity and listing volume. And then as you get into sort of July, August, particularly August, it will really die off because everyone's on vacation, right? Everyone's checked out for the summer. So there's not a whole lot of activity. September, October will pick up. That's your fall market. And then it will slow as you get into sort of November, but then particularly December, January are very, very slow. Obviously holiday season, etc.
So it's like 5.5 pull-ups, basically. I'm counting here.
Yeah, I don't work very often.
Loonie
Basically.
Hour math. Okay. Okay.
Okay, cool.
So yeah,
Thank you for that. I didn't know that.
these housing figures are typically seasonally adjusted, as you should be. I mean, if you're comparing, August sales activity to July, I mean, you should have a slowdown from July into August.
Okay, cool.
Naturally.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Thank you.
What about the signs or the post? Is that still a story out in Vancouver, or is that? Has
I
that been
haven't heard.
resolved?
I have no updates on the lawn sign post companies. I think they've, managed to manufacture, cut down a few more trees, and get them built, Rich.
Yeah, well, we have trees in Canada.
This episode is brought to you by Square One. I recently tried them out myself. Getting a quote took less than 5 minutes, and the whole process was smooth and painless. What stood out most was how customizable everything is. Most home insurance policies bundle in coverage for things like jewelry or expensive artwork, whether you own them or not. With Square One, you only pay to insure what you actually have, so you're not overpaying for stuff you don't own. Plans start at just $15 a month, and you can manage everything. Quotes, policies, claims entirely online or through their app. Head to squareone.ca/Loonie Hour and get a $20 account credit. That's squareone.ca/Loonie Hour.
But on the housing stuff, more interestingly, because we've been talking a lot with a good friend, cabin friend, Bob Sacamano, on the population data.
I know.
Rich, you've been following that pretty closely.
I have.
Obviously, Ben's been following it. It's interesting because we asked Ben in the interview last week. There's these reports coming out that like Canada had like a record surge of like immigrants coming into the country in Q1, and Ben immediately dismissed that, despite a lot of our sort of audience sending that into us. And sure enough, we had the population data that actually came out this week, and it is showing a dramatic change, which is, Rich, I'll let you kind of dive into it, but basically population growth in Canada was 0.2% annualized. So it was the lowest on record and perhaps in Canadian history. So if you actually go zoom out a little bit further, there's a couple ways to look at it, but Canada just reported the third lowest quarter for population growth since the 1950s. And one of those quarters was, of course, in 2020 when the borders were closed. So essentially, there was effectively no population growth at all in the last quarter.
And I would say, on behalf of all the young people and the working class, hallelujah. I've said on my Twitter, and I want to repeat it again here. I think that it was perhaps the single most reckless economic policy in Canadian history. And that's a big statement, but honest to God, I really thought about that. When you're studying economics, you learn about these main drivers, the sort of the big, slow-moving structural drivers that change an economy and change growth and are meaningful for policy, et cetera. And to triple population growth from what was an average of 319,000 from January 1980 to December of 2015. So we were averaging 319,000. We tripled population growth almost exclusively via immigration. That's according to the Bank of Canada. That's not me. Is fucking insane. And so, thank goodness. It's about time. And I just say the knock-on effects that has had on housing, healthcare system, there's all kinds of social talk about on this channel, but you guys can read between the lines. It was a horrendously bad policy, and to have it be unwound this way, I think is finally a really sort of merciful data point. That's what I have to say about
So it just means we don't have a negative sign. It's just basically flat, correct?
It's been flat. It's flat. That's all.
To Keith's point though. So Keith, where the government, despite their incredible fumbling of this immigration file, Mark Miller did a relatively good job at cleaning it up after it was way too late, but he did make some dramatic changes. So the changes basically was this: like, we're going to clamp down on temporary foreign workers, how much they can work, and of course, we're going to clamp down on these like fake bullshit colleges that sell these diploma mills. And so their goal was to get, I think, Rich, it was to get Canada's non-permanent resident share of the total population down from about 7% of the population. They wanted to bring that target, they wanted to bring it down to 5%.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, you're going to have to see non-permanent residents contract and basically they're going to have to leave the country. So what we've seen is for the second consecutive quarter, non-permanent residents have been contracting. So that cohort.
And how have they been incentivized to leave the country?
That we do not. Well, I mean, Rich, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know. I'm assuming they just actually, I mean, I'm not an immigration expert, but.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is that the economy is slowing. I think that, these are economic migrants or immigrants. I mean, which is, it's fine. My father was never an economic immigrant. It's something good or bad about it. It's just, that's just the reality. And when you have an economy that's not doing well, remember, let's keep in mind the population growth has been since in the last 2.5 years or 3 years or whatever, since June 2022, you've had 3 million immigrants and only 1 million jobs. Right. So people in general, I think people want to work. They want to support their family. If they come to a place where housing's unaffordable, prices are going up, and there's no employment, and the schools that they were going to aren't as attractive as they thought they were. So I think there's like some natural attrition there is what I would sort of highlight.
Yeah, I think it's just unraveling, probably more so on its own. But
yeah, which is by the way what I call it the boss cycle, which was what Ben said to us originally. When we talked about this last year or the year before, he said a lot of this unwind is going to come anyways. And so that's what's happening.
I think he's made some comments too about just the, where Ben has argued, Rich, I think that the unemployment rate in Canada is arguably higher than what the official stats are showing because the way they sort of, when you have these sharp reversals in population growth, where you go from like all-time record high population growth to suddenly turning the taps off, the way that Stats Canada Labor Force Survey calculates these people, it doesn't adjust enough in real time, essentially.
Yeah. They use a smooth number, which is not an unusual or unreasonable way of doing it. The problem with a smooth figure, a 4-month moving average, is you lose some granularity, which is literally by definition why you do that. And so that's his issue. But this data is revised. Some people online are saying, "Oh, Stats Canada is lying." Like all that shit is just so like vapid. Like if you think you can do a better job, then you fucking calculate how many people live in Canada. And
didn't we joke before? You just need the counter at the airport.
Just like is it flawed? Of course it's flawed. However, it's relatively reliable, and they do revise things. And also the other thing that came out from the release, which I thought was interesting, was the intra-provincial changes, which I thought was really cool. So one of them was, the things I was looking at was basically not everyone, excuse me. So for each province, you have in and out intra-provincial migration. And of course, if you do in minus out, you can sort of aggregate that. And then you should smooth this data because there's some seasonality to it, and you're missing. Sometimes you get the wrong signal. But what we're seeing, and we'll share the chart, is basically people moving from Ontario and BC to Alberta, which I thought was but most of the provinces like Saskatchewan and PEI, Nova Scotia are relatively flat with a couple thousand here or there or whatever. And then the big changes are people leaving Ontario and British Columbia and moving to Edmonton.
It's a pretty big barbell when you see the district.
So we'll show that chart, of course.
Yeah, we'll share the chart.
But so the other thing for people to understand, from the economics perspective here, the Canadian economy over the last number of years has been supported by more and more debt and more people all the time coming in. Now that we have, let's say there's no more population growth, at least for 1 quarter, that will have an impact. The government is very well aware of this. So now they have this challenge. How are we going to stimulate the economy again? And this is something that we've started talking about, I think, over the last few episodes. I continue to believe that all the major countries are going to come up with this fiscal bazooka because they know Canada, we can't grow if we don't have all these people coming in to spend. If we try to improve our budget, which means less borrowing, less spending relative to taxes, our economy is guaranteed to shrink. I mean, that's going to happen on an aggregate level. So by default, when the budget eventually does come out, it's going to be enormous. Now they're going to, make it look real nice with their capital, with their capital in operating accounts.
They're going to reinvent 150 or maybe 2,000 years of accounting rules.
They're going to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, the caveman will do that. But again, from an economic perspective, you're sitting wherever you are here in the country or elsewhere. You're looking at your own desk all the time. You might be able to anticipate where this money will be spent, where it won't be spent. Who should do well in this environment and who won't do well. But again, by default, if population growth is no longer growing, the government will absolutely have to borrow and spend way more than they have before. So then the question comes, it comes to Rich's conversation all the time. Will it be productive spending and investment? And so far, the track record, how long has governments existed over the years?
Oh, come on. This is such a
10, 20 years.
Plenty
maybe?
Of governments have been spent money on useful things.
Of course. So it has been done. So there's hope.
Keith, you did bring up like a good point on like the fiscal bazooka that you and I foresee evolving later this year and into next year. Keep in mind that all these Western democracies had the same sort of immigration our thesis, Rich, or plan, but I don't know what they want to call it. I think it was by design, or some might call it a mistake. But
it's almost as if they got together in Davos and
right. I mean, Australia has been one of the biggest ones of this, right? You've got this massive sort of housing bubble in Australia, and they just pumped in record immigration during the pandemic, similar to Canada. Rich, I think London was the same.
UK. Let's just do it. UK, France, Australia, New Zealand, I think participated. Canada certainly did.
Germany, big time. Germany,
big time. Joe Biden with the open borders. It was conspiracy Rich is coming out.
One
put
big
my little hat on.
Yeah. So anyways, it's all kind of reversing now, which again, kind of just flowing back into, it's going to be interesting to sort of see how this impacts, again, no population growth when you've built this economy on this. Think about what we saw during the pandemic, because we saw all these real estate developers rushing in to then build rental housing, ultimately, which is financed. I think 90% of all rental housing is now financed through CMHC, which is the taxpayer. And so we have 7% of the existing rental stock in the construction pipeline. So 7% of all the rentals in Canada, 7% of them are currently under construction. That's how much units we have. So we have a record number of rental units.
That's crazy.
7%? Yeah, 7%. So again,
I was about to sign a 2-year lease. Wait, I was about to sign a 2-year lease. Should I not do that?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, let's pull up the stats right now. I mean, if you look at Montreal, drum roll, Montreal rich rents are down for a 2-bedroom, which you just got 3% year over year.
Oh man. Okay.
So
sucker right there, man.
No, but like it's so you look at Vancouver, 2-bedroom rents are down 7% from last year. Toronto down 11%. Calgary, where there's a ton of new rental construction, again, all financed by CMHC, 2-bedroom rents are down 9%. So rents are falling in almost all major.
What about Halifax, Steve? What's the Halifax number?
There you go, up 5%, boomer.
He doesn't care. He's a boomer.
Well,
he's insulated from all of these insane policies.
Yeah, his rental portfolio is holding.
Hey, I paid my dues, boys. I paid my dues.
Here we go.
He rents out each one.
I got to tell you a few stories.
Here we go.
He rents out each one of his bedrooms in his 8-bedroom house to the foreign students.
Gated
But this is all happening at the same time, ironically. You know, we just had the G7 in Kananaskis, beautiful part of the country. You know, everyone should go to check it out, spend some time there. And you know, absolutely, all these guys are getting together, and at least one of the lads has a calculator, and they're showing each other what the numbers. So again, you know, they always chat with each other anyway. But now that the population boom strategy is likely over or less effective, again, I suspect we're going to have this massive budget stimulus coming out. And we'll see where we are when it starts to happen. Because, you know, you can issue as much debt as you want. As long as someone can buy it, it's fine. But hey, does this turn into like 2021 all over again? It could be. There's so much, you know, stimulus coming into the world. And then, of course, 2022 was a pretty good hangover in that sense. But I think, you know, so let's track this story now, you know, going forward. What evidence we see with it.
Ever been abroad and needed Wi-Fi? Download Saily. Tired of telecom oligopolies ripping you off? Download Saily. Want to avoid sketchy SIM sellers at the airport? Download Saily. Saily might be the only travel app you need. It provides an internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on roaming fees. It's easy to use, affordable, and reliable all over the world. Saily is the modern, seamless way to get connected without the need for physical SIM cards. With eSIM technology, you can instantly activate service from anywhere in the world. No more waiting in line for a local SIM or dealing with expensive roaming charges. Saily offers flexible plans that fit your needs, whether you're traveling for work or leisure. Plus, you can switch between networks in just a few taps, ensuring you always get the best coverage at the best rates. Whether you're a frequent traveler, an expat, or just someone who wants more flexibility with their phone, Saily's got you covered. No hidden fees, no contracts, just affordable, reliable data wherever you go. Visit saily.com/Loonie Hour for 15% off.
What else, Steve? What else you got there for everybody?
What else is really grinding your gears these days, Rich? BC Ferries.
Oh man, this is such a good story. It just like ticks all the boxes. I mean, you know, sometimes we worry about we're not gonna have enough to talk about, and then
all right, so basically, yeah, okay. So obviously, for our listeners that aren't in BC, essentially, you know, remember we had the last couple months we've had David Eby, who's the premier of BC, along with Mark Carney, and everyone's like, "Oh, elbows up! You know, you gotta buy Canadian. We're gonna pull all the U.S. liquor, and we gotta support the economy. People are gonna go through this is the Rich. What was it? The crisis of our lifetimes or something?
Yes."
And so we have BC Ferries, which was looking to build some new ferry vessels. And instead of having them built in Canada or anywhere else in the Western democracy, we sent them to China. So there's been this huge controversy. So David Eby basically granted the contracts to a Chinese shipbuilder, state-owned, I should say, a state-owned Chinese shipbuilder, which, you know, I would argue uses slave labor, at least to some extent. Does not
in the
have
West anyway. Maybe not for the shipping company itself, but that definitely exists there.
Yeah, I mean, has borderline sort of practices there. Does not have an industrial carbon tax.
No, it does not.
I don't think they're
and Steve, how much of China's energy is from coal?
I don't know what percent it is, but it's
60%.
60%. So
such a joke, man. These guys are
anyways, elbows up. People in BC.
So the point being is that one of the biggest provinces in Canada had to tender a pretty big contract. Do you know what the value was?
I don't know actually.
It's
four humongous ships. I mean, it's billions and billions of dollars. So
big ships. Were there Canadian tenders?
No, so that's where I wanted to defend David Eby for 5 seconds here, because there aren't really shipbuilders anymore in Canada to the same degree there was 50 years ago or 100 years ago that could step in and do this with alacrity. But that's the point, isn't it?
With what? What was that word?
Alacrity.
Alacrity
means with speed.
I didn't learn that one at my Newfoundland school.
Anyways,
growing up. Yeah. Okay.
So with speed, but that's the point, isn't it? It's like when the government has an opportunity to buy a cheaper option from an unsavory government that doesn't have to pay any carbon taxes, they took it. instead of quote unquote overpaying to build it domestically. And yet Canadians can't do, individual Canadians can't do that. You know what I mean? So in one way, I kind of respect David Eby, say, he took the cheapest option. But the reason why I think it just exposes how vacuous all this elbows up climate bullshit is that at the first opportunity, instead of paying domestic workers, reasonable salaries, keeping that technology in house, reinforcing that industry, which then feeds on and compounds over time, they didn't do that. And so,
if climate policy is the number one overriding goal from the government, it was for the previous 10 years, and that has not changed with it. You think that would be the overriding policy for every?
But this was a provincial decision, though.
It doesn't matter. The world is going to be in flames, is what they're telling us. So, you're right, Rich. They should be. If we're going to pay for it, then were there American firms? Korean,
yes, so
imagine Korean firms would have.
So that's the thing. So I don't think it could have been built in Canada realistically. We haven't built this kind of ship, or we don't have enough capacity. Full stop. But we could have sent it to, I don't know, any number of NATO allies. Korea has an enormous shipbuilding.
So, Rich, they could have sent it to Europe. The deal would have having the ships built in China versus Europe, it was apparently $1.3 billion cheaper.
How much? What was the total ticket?
I don't know.
2 billion.
No, it wouldn't have been 50% more. But the point is that like a time and time again, the people who say there are people piss on your leg and tell you it's raining, and we're going to talk about electric vehicles.
Rich, you're funny today. You had like a real challenging word to understand, and then you come up with that analogy. That's pretty cool.
Just like, we need to stop believing these people when they tell us these things. It's just, that's as simple as that. I don't know like what else they need to do to demonstrate they have no principles whatsoever.
So the main question though with the ferry is, it going to have that special announcement button
when the interest rates fall?
Yeah, if the intercom system actually works there, pal. Built in China. I ain't getting on that thing.
And see, locally, is this a big story out your way,
man,
or is it just podcasts?
Yeah, no, like locally here in BC, like I followed. I'm not like super like enthralled in BC politics, but like it's everywhere. He like, this guy was like number one. He was probably more loud and vocal than Mark Carney was about elbows up. And I think there's a real concern again in BC around China and the role that they've had in the fentanyl issues and the illicit money, and there's a natural skepticism around.
It stinks.
Yeah, it stinks. And then
just first, but we won't go into details on that, but it has been suggested there has been some connections.
Well,
Sam Cooper's covered this quite a bit, and to see this deal go through.
Yeah, exactly. We've had Sam Cooper on the podcast, who's is concerned about David Eby's ties, or who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. And so, I think it just stinks to see all these reporters, and obviously, the unions are coming out. The unions are disgusted, and the amount of money that the BC government and the federal government as well, essentially funnels towards BC Ferries to say, hey, hold on a minute. This is being outsourced to China, who is somewhat of an adversary, right? I mean, anyways.
Absolutely are. They're a totalitarian communist regime. They banned YouTube. That you can't have free speech there. That you can't even look up Winnie the Pooh. Anyways, but we got the numbers wrong. The numbers are quite a bit lower. It's about 1.3 billion apparently for the ferries, or 1.4 billion. So it would have been.
I think it was 3 ferries, 1.4 billion.
Yeah. Anyways, whatever. It would have been a lot more expensive to do them in Germany or in South Korea. I get it. But,
Anyway, the optics weren't exactly awesome to send money to the commies to build something. Okay, there we go.
Anyways, that's a good story. Oh, man. What else?
What else you got, Steve?
Well, we got more interesting politics stuffs on the gas cars. Rich, we brought this up maybe, I don't know, a year ago.
Yeah.
We brought it up because we kind of joked about it at the time, which was the federal government under the Trudeau government had put forth the bill basically saying they were effectively like, let's say, banning natural gas powered
No,
cars. But
they want to ban them.
yeah, they want them banned. But basically, I think it's by 2035, all cars have to be essentially like net zero emission vehicles, I should say.
Mhm.
Zero emission vehicles by 2035. What's interesting about that is that by 2026, 20% of sales have to be zero emission vehicles. 20%. So that's like next year. I mean, Rich, I don't know what we're at in Canada. I think it's around
Next year. It's June.
5%.
It's in 6 months. Oh.
Steve works in the real estate world. Remember, his
sorry.
sense of time is different than
probably
everyone
the
else.
end. It's probably the end of 26.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So 20%. I think. What are we at now in Canada? 5% roughly.
Yeah, it's low. It's low.
I
don't know.
So, anyways, this bill came back up in Parliament, in the House of Commons, and it was pushed through again. So it would the vote. I don't have the tally in front of me, Rich.
I think everyone. It was only the Conservatives that voted against it, I believe.
Yeah, so everyone supported it. The Liberals supported it. The NDP supported it. The Green Party supported it. Everybody went along with it. So that this is, I guess, an official policy.
I
now.
would be, kind of like the BC Ferry conversation. I would love to see the maths that were used to determine whether it's feasible or not. And that's fine. Whenever decisions are made, if you're able to support it and the data is legitimate. But I'm sure there's a lot of people in that industry that could reach out to us, let us know whether it's, this is easy to do. We're already
Hold on,
there.
here we go. So EV sales, so this is the Canada data. So with this now passing, apparently the federal government plans to reintroduce consumer rebates for electric vehicles, although the details are still unclear. EV sales have dropped significantly in early 2025, with zero emission vehicles in Canada making up 8% of new vehicle sales in Q1. So 8%. So again, apparently we're going to have to get that from 8 to 20 by next year. I don't see, Rich, I mean, you've talked about it at length in terms of the realities for, let's say, rural Canada, or particularly in these really cold climates, right? I mean, I've got an EV in Vancouver. It's, it's great in Vancouver where hydro's cheap and you have a very modest climate. But I don't see how this is going to work. And
banning something that is and super, super useful is insane. I don't care what anybody says. That's totally, totally nuts. Ostensibly, it's to save the climate by reducing emissions. Please don't ban us, YouTube. Canada's 1.6% of global emissions. And of the total emissions in Canada, cars are about 11%. So this is flicking the flea off of Godzilla. Okay, this is the most virtue signaling nonsense ever. The other thing that's also crazy is that they want to subsidize the purchases of EVs. Who buys new cars? Do working class people buy new cars? Do young people buy new cars? No, old people do, and wealthy people do. So again, it's another one of these things that transfers wealth from young working class people to old wealthy people. And fundamentally, that is what so much of these climate policies end up doing. That's not the way that they're positioned or framed, but that's ultimately how they work. And it's just more elitist virtue signaling. No working class person in Canada thinks this is a good idea. Maybe a couple of people do if you live in Vancouver Island or whatever. But it's totally crazy. And one last thing, before I go too nuts on this, is that we actually had an expert on this subject called Professor David Rapson, who works for the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, which is a super cool job and I'm very jealous of. And he's in that role at the Dallas Fed because of his lengthy work on the feasibility, both from an economic perspective and literally like the electricity perspective on electric vehicles. And he told us last year, I think it was last year, that it was bogus. We're never going to reach those numbers. And what they'll eventually do is just simply push it back and push it back and push it back.
Move the goalposts.
Move the goalpost, claim some kind of political success, which we've seen before, obviously. And so in practice, I maybe shouldn't be getting so hot and bothered.
Yeah, but Rich, hold on. So this kind of gets to like the most interesting point, which is, okay, like I think it's safe to say that you're probably not hitting 20% of sales in 2026. So these manufacturers, right, 20% of their sales are going to have to be zero emission vehicles. So as a manufacturer, you're going to be like, well, again, if the consumer doesn't want it because they can't afford it, I can't hit these targets. And so what's going to have to happen is the manufacturers must earn or acquire enough compliance credits to meet the annual zero emission vehicle sales targets, e.g., 20% of sales by 2026, rising to 100% by 2035. Each zero emission vehicle sold generates credits based on its type. Is it a battery electric or plug-in hybrid and range? If a manufacturer falls short, they must pay a penalty to purchase credits from the government to cover the shortfall. The cost per credit is not explicitly detailed in public sources, but it's designed to be significant enough to incentivize compliance. Alternatively, they can buy credits from other manufacturers who exceed their zero emission EV targets, creating a credit trading system.
So you're reading out the latest South Park episode, are you? That is insane. So more regulation, more red tape, more tax credits, or what is it, EV
I mean,
credits?
it sounds like ultimately it's going to cost these manufacturers more money ultimately. And I would imagine
it's going to cost us more money. They
well, that's what I'm
pass
saying,
down
that
the
cost
to consumers. Sorry.
That's what I'm
So
saying.
I predict the number one purchaser of EV vehicles over the next 15 months. Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is.
But Rich,
they're going to hit their goals.
We're on the same page. The point I'm making is that cost that the manufacturer is going to pay is going to get paid. It's going to get passed through the consumer.
Yeah, of course it is. That's all taxes, all tariffs, all that shit always gets pushed to the consumer. The businesses are going to keep their margin as best they can. Margin might go up one year or down another year, but in general, over time, they're going to try to keep their margin or else they're going to go out of business. The other thing I forgot to mention is emissions in Canada peaked in 2007. So, like, what are we doing? Like, it is wild to me. You know, I spent a lot of time talking with my communist friends who I love dearly, and I'm on this infamous chat that I spend all my time thinking about and looking at. And so the one counter argument that I can think of, because I think it's important, as crazy as I think this EV scheme is, that you have to sort of think about the other side. And other than shameless, stupid political vote getting from a Liberal Party, it's this idea that you're trying to build an industry, right? You're saying EVs are like electric vehicles or batteries are a strategically important industry that we should support. Okay, I can almost wrap my head around that. I could say, you know, like, for example, shipbuilding is not an industry we should have like let China corner. Or critical materials is like another industry where Canada does not have the capacity it should, and maybe we should subsidize or at least influence, do something to help support that industry because it's a strategically important industry. Let's say technology, shipbuilding, minerals, oil, and other industries that are critical to, I don't know, fighting a war with China or whatever. So that, from that perspective, I kind of understand it. But, you know, if EVs were so good, and ultimately I think that they will, in 100 years from now, I don't think we'll be driving internal combustion engines.
But if we have this big push now into EVs, we have a whole bunch of new EV battery plants that have just opened up.
Well, no, yeah. That's the thing.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
It's not.
Okay, let's move away from.
Let's move away. Something more interesting, Keith. The Fed.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about the Fed.
Tell us about the Fed.
It's a snore.
Really?
Holy,
was it really?
Man. It was a.
What was the thing about Powell? Someone had to get him a glass of water. I didn't see that. I didn't watch.
Even he was choking yesterday. He was like, "My God, guys! Like, we're starting." It was like the last day of school, you know, before summer break. So very quickly for everyone, there were no changes to Fed policy. Well, that's not true. I think they did change the QT a little bit.
Question for you: wasn't leading up to the meeting? Wasn't the markets like heavily pricing in a Fed cut?
No.
Oh, they weren't. Okay, sorry. I thought they were.
Yeah. No,
All of
sorry.
these.
Yeah. So there were no surprises whatsoever. So that's why I did that really cool snore noise there. They didn't change rates. Right now, markets are even suggesting that maybe there may not be any rate cuts. Now, sorry, if you look at the dot plot. So everyone, the dot plot is again, is geek world, but it's showing how the members of the Fed, how they feel where rates will be 12, 18 months out, things like that. And even that process is suggesting that the number of rate cuts coming up will be less than what everyone was, hoping for. And even now, some people are suggesting there won't be any rate cuts for the rest of this year. And of course, that's really going to tick off one individual in the U.S.
Too late, Powell.
It's too late, Powell. What do we determine? When is his contract in? Is it April, I think, of next year?
Oh, I don't know. He's not. I don't think he's going to be re-signed though.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he's going to be on. But back to the Fed. Okay, so no cut in rates. Specifically, Powell said that we have a solid economy. We have low unemployment, steady inflation, and labor supply and demand is balanced. So in the world of geeky central bank guys, and it's kind of like their Goldilocks scenario, right, Rich? Like there's no panic button being hit on anything right there. And that's okay, because you don't want your central banker hitting the panic button at all, or breaking the glass, for productivity measures. Because if that happens, it's a major sign. And it should be taken on by everyone. But obviously, this is being missed in Canada with the productivity story. Right. So continuing with the Fed, this is what I liked about it. So for the next 3 years, their estimate for GDP growth starting this year is 1.4, then 1.6, and then 1.8% growth for the next 3 years. Okay. The Canadian number, the Canadian number is even funnier. It's like they didn't even try. It's
is it the same? Yes.
They have a range. It's going to be between 1.6 to 1.8 this year. Next year is going to be 1.6 to 1.8% next year. And then in 2027, they're forecasting it's going to be between, drumroll, 1.6 to 1.8%. The Canadian number is flatlined. So I just bring this up because you want to see, hey, these guys all chat with each other, but their expectation, sort of ignore the absolute number, but it's the trend. So the American numbers are saying, hey, we're going to, grow a little bit. Canadian numbers saying just solid growth. Everything is perfect here. Even though population growth is not going to be flatlined, we're going to rely on Ottawa, like to pump the crap out of this place. That's going to come. But the real thing that should jump out at you here, there's no escape velocity for the economy.
Do we want escape velocity?
Yeah. Why do we need escape velocity, Rich?
To escape, I guess.
Yeah. Think about escape velocity. Who could come up with a flying narrative for that? Aviation. Is that right? I know we have some pilots that are listening. Yeah. I'm going to totally fumble this, but you need to go really fast to go up fast, right? To go up into the air. Every country in the West, as well as elsewhere, we've accumulated too much debt. This story, we've talked about it before, but increasingly more and more tax revenue has to go to interest payments on our debt, and that number is increasing at an exponential rate. So if we're only growing at a flat line or steady growth, by default, our deficits are going to get even bigger, which means a deteriorating credit position, for the country. Again, this stuff is very easy to see. Like that's where we go.
Sorry to interrupt the show. I wanted to give a quick plug to a friend of the show, Ben Rabideau, who runs Edge Analytics. Edge Analytics is an excellent research provider for real estate professionals. If you're looking for housing trends, credit trends, mortgage trends, Edge Analytics is the place to be. We plugged his show last week, but there was an error on his website, so we're replugging that once again. It's usually $50 a month, dropping it down to $30 with the Loonie Hour promo code in the link in the description notes. So head over to edgeanalytics.ca.
So I noticed the Fed lowered their 2025 GDP estimate to 1.4%, but they lifted their inflation view to 3%. So
Yeah,
could you
it was.
can you inflate the debt away?
Keith hates that.
Well, let's just say they've tried to do that for 15 years.
For
Well, they call
15,000
it-
years.
Yeah, I know, but I use 15 years because rates were literally at 0%.
Oh, right. Sorry.
You know, if you were ever going to have success with that academic fairy tale, and any economic profs listening, you know, just go to that chapter and tear it out. Like it's just it doesn't work. It's like
Well, hold on. They said
unicorns and all that stuff.
They said inflation was the problem of our life. That was Janet Yellen. Crisis of our life. I don't know. But anyways, one of the two she said. But
Yeah, because they couldn't generate enough. Wasn't
well,
that the
but that was
problem?
because they kept rates at 0 because inflation wasn't 2%. It was like 1.7. And they're like, well, this is not good enough. So let's leave rates at 0. Meanwhile, house prices were going up 10% a year in the United States.
Yeah. And in Canada, same shit. That's why I hate negative real rates.
Well, so you know what I mean? It's like, well, was inflation really 1.7 or is your stupid basket like not measuring the right things?
Yeah, you know what? I know there's what is it? Trueflation? Who does the
Trueflation? Yeah.
Yeah. So to be fair with the whole inflation argument, you know, again, this is my view on it. It's sort of close your ears, Rich.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's irrelevant what the actual number is, as long as you're consistently using the same process. So, I mean, obviously, inflation, our household, it is not 2 or 3%. I mean, it's a lot higher. I think most households across Canada have experienced 10, 15, even 20% inflation over each of the last few years. Per year, absolutely. I mean, I bet you prices for a lot of goods that families are purchasing since the pandemic, they might be up like 2x, 3x. Like, it's expensive. So anyway, whether they can, and again, when a central banker talks about inflation, they're talking about a basket of goods, price inflation. But as Steve pointed out, there's other forms of inflation as well. There's asset price inflation. And so when they say, oh, the basket of goods increased 3%, yet that family, with that 3% rise in food prices and stuff, they can't buy a house because that product or that thing they want is increased 25, 50% over the last 10 years, things like that.
What other?
You know what's crazy? On the house thing. You know what's crazy? I was reading the other day. The median age of a home buyer in the United States has gone from like 30, 31, 32 to like 52 now.
Yeah, I saw that chart. It's
wild.
Crazy.
Median age of a U.S. home buyer is in the 50s now.
From 30 to how long?
Yeah.
How long was this?
Rich, was
a while.
Data sets over like 20 plus years, I think.
Yeah. It was like a generational thing. I think that the data started in 1980 and it's now, or 1990 or whatever it is, and now it's
which is interesting because rates peaked in 1982. It was April 18th to be exact, at 3 p.m. And it went lower and lower the whole time. That's really interesting, though, right?
It was Tolston Slock, who's like not a friend of the show, but is a very good is a good strategist. But
median age is now 56 years old.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, people do live longer, though, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend more time in school. So you have to on one end, you have to, people. So you just keep that in mind. But anyway.
But I chat with a lot of younger people who have said, quite frankly, they've given up on the idea of home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll say, hey, the only way they'll get home ownership is through an inheritance. That's what they're looking at.
Well, it's because they haven't seen these modular homes that they're going to build.
Well, I mean, Rich, but like government at basically every single level in Canada is telling you we don't want resale home prices to fall, but we'll build you lots of affordable housing, which is we're going to build you social housing or rental housing, and you will live in rental housing. That's the plan.
Which is not in and of itself a bad thing, except for it like entrenches what I think is one of Canada's major problems, and that's asset rich and asset poor. It's who voted for Carney, asset rich. Who voted for Pierre Poilievre, asset poor.
I also wonder though, right? Like my thought process is like, if you're like a young person, let's say you're in your 30s, or now let's say you're entering your 40s, like normally you'd be able to own your own house, start a family. But like again, if you're renting, like what really ties you down to Canada and the country, and like just maybe leaving for greener pastures? So I do kind of wonder what that creates, right?
You're right, Steve. There are a lot of younger generations that just said, "Hey, I'm out of here." And they're
Yeah, why would you stay, right? I mean, there's nothing
and I think that's
nothing that ties you
fantastic,
down.
because for the older generations, the idea of leaving your, like, even leaving your province or town, no one did that. That was like cuckoo things to do.
Yeah.
And now it's more acceptable. And everyone listening, it's not that hard to do, guys. It's pretty. Yeah, you follow a process, but it's not hard to do.
I wouldn't recommend leaving London for Halifax, though. I was just saying, no offense to all the good Haligonians out there. But Steve, Keith, there was other banks that moved as well. No, you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. Speaking of crazy things, Keith.
Yeah,
Curious your thoughts.
I think for time we'll wrap it up here pretty quickly. It seems like now all central banks are.
Oh, are you cutting the show short?
Well, what's
I
our
was having
time?
so much fun.
Are we on the
Guys,
Loonie Hour
trying to get
yet,
out of
or
here.
is inflation biting in?
Yeah,
the toonie.
You're sick of us already, Keith. I want to know about the
Yeah.
Swiss National Bank. They cut rates to 0, and they said
I
they're
spent
not.
a lot of time, a lot of quality car driving time with you two. For everyone on the show, we had a Timbit eating, not a contest, but just a grading system.
Yeah.
And the grade I gave the birthday cake Timbit was, bah! Those things are horrible. I can't believe people eat that. That's tough.
By the way, Keith, for anyone wondering, Keith is a very slow driver.
Yeah, super slow.
Very
so slow.
We were
very
getting
cautious
by everyone. You clearly on island time over there on Halifax.
I'm a very cautious person. Maybe just as cautious as the BOJ. We'll come back to so the Bank of Japan, everyone, they had their meeting, and their change to interest rates was, drumroll,
Untouched.
It was 0. Yeah, there's no birthday cake Timbit in their rate policy. The interesting thing they did though, they tapered the taper.
Explain that.
Yeah,
I was going to ask Steve to explain it, actually. So now they're tapering less than they were before, and then so that's a way of sort of easing in some ways. So that whole period where everyone's expecting the Bank of Japan to start aggressively raising rates again and all that.
Right.
That's crazy. That's crazy talk. That's not happening again. And I think that about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they commented that, they're going to assess their monetary policy with a report that will come out in June of 26. So I think they're on a slow driving.
You can't. Are you joking? Is that a joke?
I never joke about monetary policy, Rich. It's a very serious conversation.
So
what did the Swiss do?
Okay.
Yeah, jump over to the Swiss, Rich.
Well, no, I just like the Swiss. I mean, we talked about the race to zero. Excuse me. I think about a year ago, we started talking about a race to zero, and what we meant by that was all major central banks are basically lowering interest rates, and indeed they have. The ones I track, UK, even China. Excuse me. So sorry, except Japan. So UK, China, Canada, South Korea, Europe, and Switzerland. With Japan being the exception, but they're just at a pathetic 0.5% after 25 years, so they don't count. But Switzerland, they lowered their interest rate, and they're doing that. I mean, their economy is doing okay. Inflation's okay, but really, I think that, and they won't say it like this. This is the way my interpretation, so forgive me, but the problem they have is their biggest trading partner is Europe, and Europe is, Keith, fantasy land, and it's not extremely well run. Whereas Switzerland is an extremely well run economy with a massive current account surplus, and so money's constantly flowing into this economy, whether it's trade flows or financial flows. and they need to manage that exchange rate almost more than anything because it's their largest trading partner, et cetera. And so I think they're almost in a sense forced to lower their interest rate in lockstep with the ECB. The problem is that the Swiss franc just continues to grind higher and higher and higher. I mean, that's not necessarily a problem, but so that's my interpretation of it. Now it's at the CNB, the Swiss National Bank is now at 0.0, which is
0.0.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing with Switzerland is that, their competitive advantage for the world is their banking system, which was basically hush hush. That developed from World War II, basically. No,
it's been around for way longer than that, sir. It's been around
of course,
for like
but it did
years.
accelerate. They were taking money from both sides, and no one would want to go in and topple the banks because it was crashing their own money. But if you are a small country and a small economy, and you have gobs of surplus cash rolling in every day, week, and month because you're a big exporter, you got to do something with it.
Yeah.
And there's not enough debt being issued by the Swiss government for them to, you got to put money somewhere. People think, oh yeah, I'll put my 100 grand in the bank and that's fine. It's just cash. All of a sudden the bank is sitting on 100 grand. They got to do something with it. And if you're somewhere else in the world, there's always lots of debt to buy. So there are interesting dynamics with that. The last data point for Europe is what I wanted to bring up, actually. The current account surplus for Europe, because Europe as a whole, both the EU and the Eurozone, and by the way, Switzerland is not a member of either, even though they're smack dab in the middle of, anyway, that's why it is beginning of summer, Steve. Come on, smile.
Oh,
that's a joke.
Shame on you.
The current account surplus for the Europeans declined from 51 billion to 20 billion. That's month over month.
Yikes.
So that's just a sign that this export machine that Europe is using to rely on, it's also grinding slower. So it meets the theme we're talking about in Canada and elsewhere. And that's what it is all the time. You're always looking for data points that will either confirm or view or will force you to change the view. And right now, this week, episode 193, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
we're seeing the same stuff, except for real estate in Saskatchewan. I think that's booming. Okay, Steve, wrap it up, man. Take us home.
Fire the bazookas. The fiscal bazookas are locked and loaded.
It's coming. It's coming
soon. Well, that's a good spot to wrap it up. As always, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, we ask that you share it with one friend, one family member. Help us continue to grow and build the Loonie Hour community. And as always, see you next week.